everyone, and welcome back to another week on Dollar Creative TV. So this week we are going to play with the plaster of Paris bandage. And I think that we are going to make some African pots. So what we will need to do this is obviously our bandages. We'll need some brushes and some acrylic paints and some craft paints. And then I am also going to use the acrylic coarse texture paste. Yes, then we will also need a balloon and some thread. And then of course some bowls to put water in with water that we will dip our fabric pieces into. Before we continue, I need to tell you about the additional dollar products that I've used in this project. I had so much fun and just got carried away. So I also used glass stain, regular plaster of Paris, smooth texture paste and chalk markers. The chalk markers did not quite work out as I planned, and I'm going to leave this step as part of this video on what to do when you use a medium and it does not work out for you. I like to use paints and mediums in unusual ways, but sometimes there is even a limit to my thinking. So let's get going and make beautiful pots. First, we are going to blow up the balloons. For this part, you will need someone to help you tie the thread around the end of the balloon. With the knot secure, we are now going to push this part through the middle and grab hold of it on the other side. Once you got a hold of it, you can ask someone to help you tie the thread around it so that it looks like this one. This is going to be the basic shape we are going to work around to create our African pots. Now this is where the messy but totally fun part starts. Cut the bandage into smaller pieces to make it easier to work on the rounded sides of the balloon. To create our first pot, we are going to take the small squares, simply dip it into the water and layer it over the balloon starting at the top. Lightly rub it to ensure that the plaster of Paris fills all the tiny holes in the fabric. I am going to overlap my fabric pieces the same as with paper mache. I am also going to do 2 or 3 layers to make sure that my pot is sturdy. Even though these pots will not be waterproof, you can still use it for dried flowers, twigs or even leaves. Of course, you don't need to fill it with anything and just use it as decorative art. I just love how silky and smooth this feels when I rub over it. This is the first time I'm working with this product and it is really easy to do. You cannot really go wrong anywhere. If your fabric folds and sticks together and it's not easy to open it up, use it just like that in a double layer. Just blend it in with the other pieces by rubbing over it. am going to do both top halves of my pots and let it dry completely before I do the bottoms. While I wait for the plaster of Paris to dry, I am going to cut rims from board paper to finish the top of the pots. I've already cut a rectangular shape that I'm going to use for the one pot, and for my second pot I've cut a rounded shape. Okay, so the pots are dry. They have 3 layers of plaster of Paris bandage over it to make it nice and strong. And now I am going to show you how to add the rim to the top. I already completed this pot and it is ready for painting. You can see that I already added the rim to it and I've already covered it with the bandage. But don't fear, I am going to do exactly the same with the second pot. I have secured the rounded shape with packaging tape to make sure that it stays intact. Packaging tape is glossy and I don't want to run the risk of my plaster of Paris bandages lifting from this tape. So I'm just going to cover it with some masking tape, like I always do when I work with my air dry clay sculptures. I am going to place it on top of my pot and mark the position with a pencil. I am not concerned if it is not exactly in the center, and once I have marked it, I am going to use a cutter to cut away the excess of the plaster of Paris. Work very careful, especially if the pot is not completely dry yet. For now, I am just scoring the plaster of Paris to ensure that my pot does not break. Just remember that while you are cutting, your balloon might just pop and catch you by surprise. Very carefully, you can trim the edge of the opening to the pot. It is very easy to cut the plaster of Paris even when it is completely dry. We can then just shake out the dry bits of plaster and the balloon. And it is as easy as that. With a hot glue gun, I am now going to glue the rounded rim to the top of the pot. Work very fast, but be careful not to burn yourself. The glue dries very quickly and we need to secure this rim to the top of the pot before it does. Then hold it in place for a few seconds to ensure that it stays in place. And will you look at that? A beautiful African pot. I have never used plaster of Paris bandages before, and I'm really impressed with what I've done so far. I am going to cover the rim with plaster of Paris bandages so that it matches the texture of my pot. And there you have it, our second pot is done. Now I have to think of ways to paint and decorate the pots. This pot is going to be painted with a layer of plaster of Paris. I've mixed it into a liquidy paste and I'm going to paint the pot with it. Make sure to work fast because the plaster of Paris dries quickly. When the paste gets too thick to paint, just add some more water. add as many layers as you want to. One layer was enough for me to resemble a handmade African pot with the rough textures you can only get from the handmade clay they use in rural villages. To paint the inside of the pots, I simply mixed plaster of Paris with water and some black ink to a liquidy paste and poured it in so that I can swivel it around until the inside is fully covered. The reason I use plaster of Paris with my watering paint is because it dries very quickly and I don't have to worry about any paint running down on the inside of my pot. It also adds a smooth layer to the inside of the pot. You will notice that the pot is wet again, and that is because the plaster of Paris absorbed all the water that I mixed with the paint. Just put it out in the sun and let it dry again. I've already painted both of the pots on the inside and they are completely dry. You will see that I've also painted the bottom half of this pot with the coarse texture paint. I like the coarse texture paint because for me it looks very much like cement. The top half of this pot was painted with smooth texture paste and a palette knife. I also decided that I would like to glaze the inside of these pots, and for that I'm simply going to pour acrylic glaze into the pots, swivel it around and let it dry. I'm using a paintbrush to make sure that the glaze is spread evenly. On this pot, I would like to paint some African patterns. I am just going to follow my instinct and just draw lightly with a pencil so that I know where to paint. You can decorate your pot however you want to. You can paint it, you can stencil on it, whatever you would like to do, it is up to you. I am just drawing basic shapes. The finer detail will be added later. I want this pot to really make a statement, so I decided to paint it a warm, rusted dark orange with black and white. To get my orange color, I'm simply mixing red and yellow craft paint. I am going to paint the bottom half of the pot in this warm, rich, dark orange color. most of you already know that I like to use alcohol ink in my mixed media backgrounds because I just love the dripping effect. I normally mix Dala's acrylic ink with rubbing alcohol to make my own alcohol ink. Today I'm going to do something completely different and use Dala's glass stain to do the drip effect on the bottom half of this pot. I mixed some of the orange and the sepia color to make a rich, dark, warm orange color. I also added a little bit of rubbing alcohol so that it can run smoothly and with more ease. I do not want to swivel the pot too much because I do not want the drip effect to run in any other direction than downwards. While I wait for the glass stain to dry, I am going to take black craft paint and start painting in my patterns. I finished painting with the black, and I also painted the top half of my other vase with the orange. The glass stain is dry and I absolutely love the glossy effect it has over the matte acrylic paint. I am going to do the exact same effect on the top half of the other pot. I love using this effect. It is exactly how I wanted it to be. I think what I like most about this technique is that you cannot really control the flow of the paint or the ink. It is almost like taking a risk. It's being fearless and just a way to express yourself. And I love it even more that it almost every time turns out to be perfect. I also really like the coarse bottom half of this pot and decided to paint the top rim of this pot with the same coarse texture paste to balance it out. Now I am going to use a white chalk marker to add some dots to my patterns. And like I have said in the beginning of this video, it was not a good idea. And you will see why a little bit later in this video. I could have easily edited this part out of the video, but I wanted to keep it a part of the lesson to show you that not every product, no matter how versatile it is, can be used for everything that you want to do. At this part of decorating the pot, it seems to be working fine. The chalk paint runs smoothly and I can draw really fine lines on my pot with it. It is the first time that I'm using these chalk pens and I'm really impressed with the results. But like I discovered a little bit later in decorating my pots, it is actually meant for writing on a blackboard and erasing after you are done. As soon as I wanted to paint some glaze over my decorated pots, these white lines smudged. As a quick solution, I thought of spraying it with artist fixative before I paint the glaze, and then it turned yellow. When doing art or craft, not everything will always work out the way we want it to be, but we can be innovative and creative and try to fix it. And it's exactly what I did. Just look at my pretty African pot. While I'm waiting for the pot to dry, I decided to paint the coarse bottom half of our first pot with some craft paint. I am going to use the tan craft paint, and I'm going to create an ombre effect with dark brown acrylic. I wanted this coarse bottom half to look like handmade clay that was made in the rural villages with mud. I really like it. I can see myself using this coarse texture paint many more times. Now this is the part where I realized that my beautiful white chalk lines smudged and turned yellow after I tried to seal it. I wanted the top half of the pot to also be glossy and shiny like the drip effect on the bottom. I've learned a lesson today, and lucky for me, my paintwork has not been ruined completely and I can still save it. I am going to paint the top part of my pot with the glaze medium because it's already been sprayed with fixative and I can no longer smudge the paint. Once the glaze is dried, I will simply use my paint markers to fix all the lines, and in future use my chalk markers for the blackboard. The acrylic paint on my other pot is dry and I am now just going to paint the rim in the same tan color as the bottom. And just look at that, a beautiful decorative piece of art that started out with plaster of Paris bandages. And all I need to do with the pattern pot is to fix the lines with white and black paint markers. And I did just that. What I thought is to be ruined is also a piece of decorative art that I would be proud to put in my house. I hope that you have enjoyed this week's lesson with me, and I'm looking forward to next Friday. Bye for now.